Welcome to Dark Knight Films Reviews. I'm your guest host for the evening, Buddy Campbell, and tonight I will be ranking my top 10 favorite Gene Hackman performances of all time. Now keep in mind, I have not seen every Gene Hackman movie ever made, and so obviously my list of his top 10 performances is strictly based on those movies I have actually seen of his. And also keep in mind that this is not necessarily Gene Hackman's best 10 movies he was in, but it's strictly my favorite top 10 performances of his, no matter how great the movie was. So, without further hesitation, let's get this thing started. We're going to start off my top 10 list with a movie that was considered a bomb at the box office, but Hackman was simply stupendous in his short time on the screen. The film was called Wyatt Her, and it was released in 1994. Hackman played Nicholas Earp, the father of legendary lawman Wyatt Earp. While the movie as a whole was drawn out way too long and the over-dramatization of most of the scenes were tedious and tiresome, Hackman was the exception. He stole every scene he was in with his imposing gravitas as no one else can. He made his no-nonsense character memorable in the best possible way. Next up at number 9, I have Enemy of the State, that came out in 1998 and was directed by the legendary Tony Scott. And in this one, Hackman starred alongside Will Smith. Tony Scott makes this a high-octane sugar rush of a cat-and-mouse political thriller. But even though it gives vibes of an MTV video at times, Hackman brings a grounded, down-to-earth aura to the film. The movie is loaded with tons of young, hotshot actors, but Hackman, along with fellow veteran actors Jon Voight, Gabriel Byrne, and Stuart Wilson, are able to keep the movie from spiraling into a live-action video. Hackman plays Brill, a former government intelligence official who is now living off the grid, who is reluctant to help Will Smith from getting killed. Hackman plays Brill as a paranoid conspiracy type, much like he did in one of his earlier masterpieces, The Conversation. His paranoia, however, makes him the smartest character in the film and a true joy to watch. Coming in at number 8 is a movie that did not do very well at the box office, but it is still one of my very favorite Gene Hackman movies. It came out in 2001 and is called Heist, and it is a superbly made movie from director David Mamet, who is a master of tense, edge-of-your-seat thrillers. I fell in love with this movie the first time I saw it, strictly based on the fact that I am a sucker for great heist movies, and this is probably one of the best I've ever seen. Hackman shines in the role of Joe Moore, an accomplished thief who loves his work. He plays the role superbly alongside great character actors like Sam Rockwell, Delroy Lindo, Rebecca Pidgeon, Danny DeVito, and Ricky Jay. Mamet manages to weave the story into a suspense thriller full of action and intrigue, led by Hackman's incredible performance. I definitely recommend this movie for anybody who loves a captivating crime movie along the lines of Heat and the Thomas Crown Affair. At number 7, I have The Conversation from 1974, and it was directed by the Godfather's Francis Ford Coppola. It starred Hackman along with John Cazale, Cindy Williams, Terry Garr, and with a minor appearance from Harrison Ford. Hackman plays Harry Call, a surveillance expert so wrapped up in his work he becomes extremely paranoid of everything and everyone around him. The character of Harry is brilliantly played by Hackman, who gets so wrapped up in his surveillance work he literally drives himself to the edge of insanity. It was truly one of Hackman's finest performances on screen. Now, this is the movie I was referring to earlier when I was talking about Enemy of the State. A lot of people say Hackman's character from Enemy of the State was actually the same as his character of Harry Call from The Conversation, but we'll let you be the judge of that. Coming in at number 6 is Hackman's legendary role of New York City detective Jimmy Popeye Doyle in the classic movie from 1971 called The French Connection. Directed by William Friedkin, The French Connection is mostly known for having the greatest car chase in movie history, with the possible exception of Steve McQueen and Bullitt. But the movie is so much more entertaining than just the famous car chase. Hackman gives an Oscar-worthy performance as Doyle, portraying the character as a vile, degenerate, yet complex brute of a man with few redeeming qualities. It's probably Hackman's most grating performance ever on screen, and as such, Hackman received the Oscar for Best Actor for this role, and it will always be regarded as one of the best theatrical performances of the 70s. Next up from 1995 is the underwater masterpiece known as Crimson Tide. In this tense military thriller, Hackman is once again paired with director Tony Scott. But this time around, Hackman plays the commanding officer of a nuclear submarine who squares off with his new XO played by Denzel Washington, who's not afraid to go toe-to-toe with him as they duel for dominance of the submarine. The conflict between the two arises after both Hackman and Washington have different interpretations of an order they received as to whether or not the use of deadly force was given. The result is an intense battle between the two, which gives the audience a front row seat to this highly charged battle of wills between these two legendary actors. At number 4, I have Mississippi Burning, which came out in 1988 and was directed by Alan Parker. In this period piece set in rural Mississippi in 1964, Hackman plays a veteran FBI agent sent to investigate the disappearance and murder of 3 civil rights workers. Hackman is paired with a young, idealistic partner played by Willem Dafoe, who is trying to do everything by the book. Hackman, on the other hand, has been around and knows how field work actually works. He will do whatever is necessary, legal or illegal, to get the job done. This causes tension between the two agents, who must put aside their differences in style in order to get justice for the murdered young men. Hackman was able to showcase his badassery in this movie, especially in a scene where he goes into a redneck bar looking for answers about the murders and gets to humiliate a white trash local played by Michael Rooker. This movie probably displays Hackman's brawn more than any other. Coming in at number 3 is Unforgiven, released in 1992 and directed by Clint Eastwood. In this Western, Hackman plays the sheriff of Big Whiskey, Wyoming, who is known far and wide as Little Bill Daggett. Little Bill runs the town like a mob boss with an iron fist. Whatever he says is the law, no questions asked, because he is the judge and jury. He is outwardly pleasant and likable, but only if you follow his rules. If you don't, he becomes a violent, ruthless enforcer, giving no quarter and showing no mercy. In this movie, Hackman comes to odds with 2 former outlaw cowboys played by Clint Eastwood and Morgan Freeman, along with their young partner played by James Wolfitz. Little Bill immediately takes a disliking to Eastwood's character of William Money and instantly starts assaulting him for not abiding by the town ordinance of no weapons allowed. As the film goes along, Little Bill continues to inflict his wrath on anyone he deems deserving, even to the death. He sees himself as a hero, but is actually a bully wrapped up inside a monster. His Jekyll and Hyde persona makes Hackman's performance of Little Bill one of the most complex villains in cinematic history. Next up at number 2, I have The Firm, released in 1993 and directed by Sidney Pollack. The movie is a legal thriller based on the novel of the same name written by the legendary John Grisham. In this one, Hackman plays Avery Tolar, a veteran lawyer for a shady law firm based in Memphis. This firm has just hired Mitch McDeere, played by Tom Cruise, who is fresh out of law school and is oblivious to the criminal work of the firm. Avery is selected by the firm to mentor Mitch until he gets his feet wet and starts enjoying the perks of the firm. After that, Avery will reveal the underhanded practices of the firm to Mitch, knowing it will be too late for him to leave. Hackman's character of Avery is complex and hard to read. Even though Avery is high on the food chain at the firm, Hackman plays him as both brutal and outwardly decent at the same time. Avery shows a kindness and likability to Mitch and his wife, which makes it difficult for the viewer to decide if Hackman is a villain or an ally. This dichotomy makes Avery Tolar one of Hackman's most intriguing characters he has ever played. And now we've made it to number 1, but before I reveal the top spot, I do want to say that I have never seen a bad performance by Gene Hackman. Even in his movies that weren't very good, he always gave an exemplary performance in his role. When I was making out my list of possible top 10 Gene Hackman performances, I had written down over 20 movie titles. That's how many I thought were worthy enough to make the list. But I eventually dwindled the list down to 10. But there are a few I want to mention that failed to make the final list, and they are Bonnie and Clyde, The Poseidon Adventure, Bat 21, Twilight, No Way Out, and Get Shorty. All quality movies you might want to check out. But on to number 1. And finally at number 1, I have what is quite possibly the greatest sports movie of all time, Hoosiers from 1986, directed by David Anspaugh. Most of the time you may go to the theater and see a movie, but every so often you may go to the theater and have an experience. a cinematic phenomenon that talks to you, that calls out to you, that inspires you. That was what happened when I saw Hoosiers. In this movie, Gene Hackman plays Norman Dale, an embattled high school basketball coach with a flawed past, given a second chance at redemption. He is an aging coach from New York who is hired as the boys' basketball coach at a tiny high school in Hickory, Indiana. Nobody in town knows anything about this mysterious coach except the school superintendent, who was friends with him back in the day. The superintendent knows about Coach Dale's fall from grace, but is willing to wipe the slate clean and let him coach his high school team. Coach Dale faces immediate resistance from everyone in the community, including a neighbor and fellow teacher, Myra Fleener, played by Barbara Hershey. His only friend is a local drunk who is also the father of one of his players, who he calls Shooter and is played with true greatness by Dennis Hopper. Coach Dale must not only win over his players, the town, Myra, and Shooter, but he must also win over himself. He must gain the confidence in himself he lost in his troubled past and instill that confidence into his team and take them to glory. When this movie came out in 1986, I was a basketball player in a small high school in Arkansas, not too much different from Hickory High School in the movie. I walked out of that theater inspired and motivated by what I saw in Coach Dale. I was hell-bent on being the best player and person I could be after that. So I will always be thankful for the performance of Gene Hackman as Coach Dale in Hoosiers. And there you have it, my top 10 favorite Gene Hackman performances of all time. Now, I know many of you are thinking that I should have included some movies that were left off, or maybe you're thinking, how could he have rated that crap so high? Hey, brother, I can't make a list on everybody else's taste. I can only go by mine. But I would still love to hear your thoughts, so drop your comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel if you like the rankings. And if you didn't like my rankings, please like, share, and subscribe anyway, because it would be a pretty boring world if everybody agreed on everything. I mean, it's like my grandpa used to say, if everybody liked the same things, everyone would be chasing your grandma around.
And if you missed last week's ranking video, check out the link above. And if you missed any of our other ranking videos, check out this playlist and get caught up.